Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today are Louis D'Souza and Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And yes, before you ask, that one's going to get redone a little bit because we have you on an old video. It doesn't look so good, but we'll fix that for next week. We just had to. Just wanted to let you know. We weren't going to leave you in that state. That's all.
It's exciting to see my face up there.
How about that? Yeah, kind of interesting, kind of different, isn't it? So, well, anyway, I have a couple of announcements to let people know about. First of all, this Thursday and Friday, there will be no shows. Louise and I are going away for a couple of days, so we're going to kind of take a hiatus from the show, but we'll be back again next Monday. So be prepared. There's going to be a quiz. No, not really. There's going to be a lot of fun to talk about from that trip, I'm sure. Also, let's see, what else do we have coming up? That's it for this week. This week is going to be a short week. Makes it nice and simple. And I don't know whether you have, wherever you are listening in the world, if you're living in the United States, particularly in the northern part of the United States, you're probably experiencing something similar to what we're experiencing here in the Northeast, in that there are a lot of forest fires going on in the West, and Louis just sent me a little thing saying that my sound is funky. Is my sound still funky, Louis?
It's suddenly getting better again. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's trying to decide. So we'll let it decide, and if it decides for the worst, let me know. Okay. So anyway, we have these forest fires going on in the western part of the country, generating gigantic amounts of smoke, and that smoke has basically traveled east, 2,000 to 3,000 miles, and is now impacting us with some rather poor atmosphere conditions. So I figured, well, that is actually a little bit of an interesting topic, because we all know the basic idea of the law of attraction is that we attract into our lives everything that comes into our lives. And one of the more interesting questions that comes along with that is, well, what about weather patterns? What about atmospheric patterns? Because, I think I could easily make the case that the forest fires are going on because a large number of people have a vibration going on that way. But what about the people who didn't have a vibration going that way, who are simply living in the same area? So I'm just kind of curious to think, well, I'm going to go to you first on this, Louis, because you always have a very clear idea about how all this stuff works out. But what's your take on that? Are we actually attracting for somebody else if we have a whole bunch of us all pulling in this miserable air that we're getting right here in the Northeast?
So, Walt, you know the idea of thoughts and trains?
Oh, yes. But go ahead and reiterate
what you want. It's a train going this way. If you've got a thought about what you don't want, train pulling it back again. So you've got this ding-dong battle. Now, when you've got a group of people, the one whose train is going the strongest is going to be the one that's going to win.
Strongest defined as?
Strongest defined as the... if you've got a train going this way of what you want, train going that way of what you don't want, the one that's the strongest one is the one who's going to land up winning.
Okay. So
when you've got a group of people, you've got a group of thought forms, and the one that's the strongest is the one that's going to start manifesting.
So, I can certainly see that argument. That makes a lot of sense. But there's also a flip side to that argument, which is, and I'll give you an example that came out of my experience. This is with weather, but it's not so much with poor air quality from forest fires. It's about a microburst, a small, isolated, but very intense thunderstorm that came through the area when we were living in Virginia. And what happened was, it was, I would say probably mid-June, early July, something like that. And there was a storm that was coming through. Now, this is during a time when there is significant tornado activity in that part of the country. So we were originally wondering, is that what's going on? Is there some sort of tornadic activity coming our way? And as it turned out, there was this storm that was coming directly at us. And you know how these days you can go on to various weather sites, you can actually zoom in on the radar and see exactly where it's going. Well, this particular storm was headed exactly for our house. Perfectly. It was right on line. And so I turned to Louise and I said, hey, Louise, we got to do our weather thing because we have a history of being able to influence weather. So we did. And we started doing our stuff to try to clear that weather out and make sure we weren't negatively impacted by the storm that was coming through. And when the storm came, I was at that point, I was very much experimenting with law of attraction. I was still testing things out in a big, big way. And so I figured, well, this is another test. I want to go outside and see what's happening. Not exactly the smartest thing to do in the middle of a major weather event, but nevertheless, that's what I decided to do. So I go outside and I'm looking around outside, and sure enough, I mean, you can actually see all over the place. There's like really dark storm clouds. There's a lot of wind, which you get with a microburst. A microburst is kind of like a little mini hurricane that comes through really quickly, but can be quite devastating in a very small area. You could see that trees were waving all over the place, except directly on our property. And I looked above, and there was blue sky right above our house. But everybody around us had these deep, dark clouds, and the storm came through, and it was just howling, and there was rain pouring down. You could see the rain coming down through the atmosphere, and our property was untouched. After the storm, Louise and I took a drive around the neighborhood, and 2 houses or 3 houses to the left, 2 or 3 houses to the right were untouched. Everything else for like 3 miles around was trees down, limbs down, stuff all over the place, debris and everything, except in our one little area. So how do you modify your train theory with that experience?
Well, the individual has its own field and own ability to do things. So you have the general public that doesn't have that kind of knowledge or even the ability to perceive that they can change the weather. Mm-hmm. You do have the facility, you do perceive the ability. You have, from what you've said, had some kind of experience of being able to do it in the past. So you've built up an active vibration of what is possible for you in your life. Mm-hmm. So in only your surrounding area, with your field and with your belief structure, you were able to protect it. One of the ways I do it, I don't know how you did it because you didn't explain it, but one of the ways I do it is I create a vortex around me that is constantly flowing and moving that protects me. So anything that hits it, any thought forms or anything that comes to it just gets bounced off this vortex that shoots around me, and it's cone shaped. And the cone is on a point at the top, and it comes down to like a skirt.
Oh, okay.
And that's the way I visualize it. So if I'm ever wanting to shield myself, my car when I go away shopping, or my house, or my daughter, or whatever, I just visualize this. Of course, my daughter will override it because she's got more powerful with her own belief structures. No, that's what other people will do, but you can still kind of put your shield on them because you're still family and you still got this relationship going. And there's an agreement of allowing between family members and not allowing strongly between family members, depending on the relationship. So yeah, it varies depending on. The closer it gets to you, the more you have the ability to affect it, and the further away from you, the more the general thought processes will prevail.
Yeah, I think that's
in
true.
Whatever direction.
Right. Emery, do you have any experience trying to influence weather patterns or events that can touch a whole bunch of people?
Well, we were in a situation where it was way before I knew about law of attraction, but we had this horrendous rainstorm and thunderstorm, and our street flooded, and therefore our house flooded. And although that was awful, it kind of brought a lot of things that I'd been wanting then happened. Like I wanted new furniture, I wanted new floors, I wanted to decorate. And I just kind of took, that was the opportunity then for us to do it, and it all was paid for and stuff. So although it wasn't a pleasant experience, but then there was also good things in the fact that the street came together and people came together in the street that didn't normally meet. So we just took it. We just always used to call ourselves the luckiest unlucky people because these things would happen, but we would try and make the best of it. And that's kind of how we perceived it. So yeah, I completely agree with Louis. I think there is a stronger collective, and I think the voting system shows that, because we don't all vote the same person, but only one person gets in. It's the strength of that, isn't it? But
it's a weighted system, really. It's weighted voting because not everybody gets an equal vote because it depends on how high they are up into the vortex. If they're, if they're in the vortex rather than out of the vortex. If they're in the vortex, they're both going to count for more, really, in the sense of a voting model. So just interesting. And Louis, you were asking what my method is. My method, I don't actually use a vortex. I just use an image of no matter what weather I want to influence, doesn't matter whether it's winter, summer, fall, spring, doesn't make any difference. I always use the same scene, and that scene is very moderate, comfortable temperatures, blue sky, sun, little puffy white clouds, not humid, very comfortable, dry weather. Basically, my favorite weather, my favorite kind of day to be outside. And when I focus on that with intent and belief and trust that what I'm going to get is going to be closer to what I have in mind, then it works. I mean, it pays off almost every time. Where I trip up is when I think to myself, well, this couldn't possibly work. This situation is so bad right now, nothing that's going to affect it, and of course, nothing does. That's the way that works. But on those occasions where I've been able to get myself to really believe, I've had some really interesting results, really fascinating results. One of my favorite is a story that I've told before here on the show where I like to go walking as often as I can. I try to go every day, but during gardening season, that doesn't work too well. But anyway, I try to get out as much as I can. And my walk is about 2 miles out, 2 miles back. It's about a 4-mile walk. And on this one particular day, I got out there and it was overcast and not a really pleasant day. It wasn't bad. It wasn't raining or anything like that, but it was kind of on the cold side, a little bit, not cold, but just, a little bit of a chill in the air kind of a thing. And I was thinking, this would be really nice if it would be a really nice day. I wonder if I can just clear the sky. I'd like to just turn that sky blue. And I'm just going to use this as a test. And I really threw myself into it. For the first 2 miles, I didn't even look up at the sky. I'm just focused on, blue sky, comfortable temperatures, sun, little puffy clouds, all my little scene, right? And I got to the end of the 2 miles and I looked up and it was all gray. I said, oh, darn. Well, it didn't work. And then I turned around and behind me, the entire sky was blue.
Blue.
A line was directly above my head.
Well, listening to your story, you know what I was thinking all the way through?
What was that?
Richard Bach, Illusions.
Yes, right.
I was like, I know where you got that from.
Yeah, that's true. That did influence me that day. It absolutely did. Yeah. And I was comparing myself we have actually done a show or two on that particular book, but for those people who don't know the book, there's a particular chapter where the two main characters are engaged in a discussion about controlling weather, and the student asks the teacher, how do you do it? And the teacher describes, and the student asks for a demonstration. So the teacher says, well, pick a cloud, and the student picks the biggest, meanest, blackest cloud he can possibly see. And the teacher says, do you hate me or something?
And then he turns around and he says, which cloud did you want me to remove? Yeah. And it's completely gone. And he's just like,
That's exactly what I was thinking of that day. You're exactly right. Yeah. But it was fun to reproduce my own version of it, I have to say. And that's one of many. I've had a lot of experiences. Like you, Anne-Marie, I had a situation before I learned about law of attraction. My wife and I had just met. We were going to visit my parents, who at that point were living on a lake in Virginia, a beautiful lake called Smith Mountain Lake, absolutely gorgeous. Great for all kinds of water activities and so forth. And on the way, or getting ready to do the drive down, it's a long drive. It's like a 12-hour drive, so it's a long trip. But getting ready to do that trip, we were checking the weather, and there was a hurricane coming up from the Florida area, and it was aiming directly where we were going. It was targeting directly to that lake. And like I said, I didn't know anything about the law of attraction, but we needed that vacation. We were getting ready to get married. We were wiped out. We needed to have a really good week of just rest and relaxation. And so out of pure desperation, I just determined out loud, no, that hurricane is not going to get in our way. We're going to have a great vacation. And so we got in the car, we headed south. When we got there, we found that the weather forecast, as often happens with hurricanes, had changed. The hurricane was hovering over South Carolina and wasn't going anywhere. And it stayed there the entire week. And then when we drove back north, it followed us north.
Interesting.
And every time I tell that story, I always apologize to the people in South Carolina who actually had to endure that hurricane when it was just drenching them for like a full week. Because I have to say, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I would have done it differently if I'd understood. But
I'm sure the gardens appreciate
That's
it.
some power, Walt.
For years, I didn't even think that it was me. Like I said, I didn't know about the law of attraction. I'd never heard of the term. And it wasn't until I learned about LOA and Louise pointed out to me, you use that. And I said, what do you mean? She says, back in 99 when you got rid of the hurricane. I said, oh, yeah. How did I do that? It was that kind of an experience. How did I do that?
Well, today we went to the lavender fields. Now it was overcast when we left, and we love going there every year to take photos, etc. And David Strickles just liked our photos, I think.
Oh, nice.
On Facebook. So we arrived there, and it was still a bit overcast, and then as soon as we got out into the field, the sun came out and it was glorious. It was absolutely brilliant. When we left, it was still glorious. So the way I try to do it now is not so much to change the weather, but to find a natural, organic way to coincide of getting what I want, where all the pieces fit together and just work. So it's not like me needing to manipulate anything. I'm just right time, right place, just happens to fit into all the different places. The coordination of the picking up Eloise's little friend, my younger daughter's friend, etc., and dropping her off and everything. Everything just seems to come together at a natural progression and thing, and I just love it. It's just so absolutely amazing, because there's less and less effort of wanting to try and get the weather to change or this or that. You're just focused in your mind. You've got this kind of, if not that, something better mentality is always going on inside you. If not that, something better. If not that, something better. And it's kind of always working out better and better and better, and things are just coalescing to come together with the cooperative components of the universe. And I don't know how to explain it, but that's kind of the best I can do.
That's a good explanation, and I love the fact that you're doing it with with no resistance and not trying to make things happen. Which, by the way, is diametrically the opposite of Louise and I. We constantly are manipulating the weather, and we're very proud of it. So I'm just saying there are a couple ways to do this thing, but nevertheless, yours is the easier way. Yours is definitely the low energy way. It's easy.
You need to come to the UK and just sort our weather out, please. I need a summer.
Anne-Marie, I don't have any problem with the weather here. What's your problem?
It's true. The weather is whatever you're going to make it to be. I mean, I'll give you another example. Just outside of Washington, D.C. is a little town called Alexandria on the south side of the town, on the south side of the city. And there was one day when we were living in Virginia that Louise and I decided to go to Alexandria for the day. It was a weekend. It was, again, a situation where we needed to get away for a bit, just have a day trip, just to get away from all the pressures and so forth. So we got in the car, and when we got in the car, the weather forecast was saying rain. Rain where we lived, rain in Alexandria, rain in D.C., rain along the highway. It was going to be rain, 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 rain. And so we looked at each other and we said, let's go anyway. Let's see if we can influence the weather. We've done that in the past. Not 100% of the time, but we've done it. So, okay, we get in the car. Louisa's was actually a little bit stronger that day. My faith was a little bit on the weak side that day, but hers was pretty strong. So she was doing most of the heavy lifting, shall we say. But she was convinced it was going to work out okay. So we got on the highway, and it's about I don't know. It depends on when you're on that highway, because it's a very, very busy highway most of the time. But on that particular weekend, it was relatively not busy. So it was probably an hour trip. If it's a bad day, it'll be 2.5 hours. But that day was an hour trip. We got about halfway there, and nothing had really changed. The weather didn't look any better. The forecast wasn't looking better. The sky didn't look any better. My faith was dropping through the floor. And Louise says, no, it's going to be fine. So I said, okay, I'll ride on your faith for a bit, because mine isn't doing too well right now. We get to the Beltway. There's a highway beltway that goes around DC, and take the Beltway south, heading down to Alexandria. And as we come around the curve where you can start getting to Alexandria, you see there's this little opening in the clouds right above the city, right above the town. I'm not sure if Alexandria is a city or a town. I think it's a small city, but right above the city. And as we get off the highway, of course, there's a very extensive highway system to get in there because this is TC. But as we get off the highway and come into the town, right over the main street that we're going to do all of our shopping and visiting on is the opening. In other words, right above us, it was blue sky. Everything else was cloudy and rainy and everything else, but there was beautiful weather right there. We got there. Of course, nobody was there because they thought the weather was going to be bad. So we had easy parking. That was easy. Got out onto the street, went off to get some ice cream. Nobody was in line for ice cream because we were the only ones there. Had a wonderful time. We spent the entire afternoon there in this gorgeous weather. People started to show up. And around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we decided we were done. So went back to the car. As soon as we got back to the car, it started pouring rain. And then we drove home in the rain. So, I mean, that's about as controlled as you're going to get, I think.
I actually had a similar thing on my wedding day. It was pouring. We woke up, it was pouring with rain. It was grey. It was a real grotty day. And I arrived at the church. I had the brollies over me with my big frock. But I just knew that I was going to have photos outside the church. And literally sort of coming towards the end of the ceremony, and suddenly the sun was coming through the windows. And you could see my photographer going, hurry up, hurry up. And literally we went outside. We went outside. It was just beautiful sunshine. You would never know there was any drops of rain. We got in the car, got to the hotel, poured down. And it was just perfect. We got our photos outside. I just knew that was going to happen again. Didn't know about law of attraction. But I had this vision in my head. And obviously I truly believed because that's what happened.
Ah, yeah.
See, the important thing about weather or anything that you want to achieve is to be focusing on what you want and not what you don't want. You say, I don't want the rain. I don't want the rain is not the way to go about it.
No, that doesn't work very well.
I want the clear sky. I want the clear sky is the way to go about it. And once you get that right, everything starts falling into place.
That's right. And when you end up doing it by accident, like your story, Anne-Marie, yours were kind of by accident. You didn't really know LOA. My earlier cases were also by accident. I think what that really is, that by accident is us unwittingly tapping into universal law. We didn't know how it worked. We couldn't have rationally, consciously expressed it. But I think we were kind of getting a sense of it in a way that perhaps we hadn't done before. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought of it that, but there's so many synchronicities in life. Like I remember driving past this street I now live in and thinking, oh, I would love to live in those houses. I bet life's perfect if you live in one of those houses. And here I am living here, you know. All these little things that happen. Yep. Like I wanted to get a particular job. I wanted to get a particular promotion and they happened. So yeah, it must have been there subconsciously. Or it was just starting.
Which raises an
isn't it so much?
Oh, go ahead.
Isn't it so much more delicious doing it consciously?
Yes, it's so fun. So fun because I was like yourself. I took myself for a walk around the fields today, and as I was walking around the fields, I was thinking, "This is my mind movie." There's me sort of thinking, I'm going to be living near the countryside, but actually, I've got these fields that I didn't really take much notice of. And I was walking around a local park, turned to left, around these fields. I'm like, oh, here's my movie. I'm here. And that just felt amazing.
That's cool when it plays out like that and you're getting what you're asking for. And you're noticing. That's the other part about it. Because it's so easy to be in that place where you got there by accident and you didn't notice. I didn't notice that I moved the hurricane. Never occurred to me until my wife pointed out some 9-10 years later. I was oblivious. But when you know and when you recognize and you've noticed, that's when it's cool.
As Abram says, it's so much more delicious.
Yeah, it's more delicious. It really is more delicious. Intriguing is the best word I can think of. It seems inferior to what it really is, to use that word. It's exciting, I guess. That isn't quite what I have in mind either. But it just grabs my attention whenever, through a conscious process, a deliberate process, I end up getting what I asked for. It's almost like I'm stunned. Like, wow, what just happened? That's the feeling behind it.
And that stunnedness is what's going to slow you down getting your next one.
Well, that's true, but I work one step at a time.
You understand that, but I don't know if all the listeners.
It's a good point. It's a really good point. I don't think it's a good one to get hung up on, but yeah, it's a good point.
When it's the next natural step, then it's easy for you to perform and get whatever you want to. But when it's like, oh, such a big leap, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get it, and all those kind of thoughts that go in your head, then you're pushing it away while you're trying to get to it.
Right. And of course, the risk with the
and that's
approach
what Dan says, isn't it? Well,
what was that, Anne-Marie?
Sorry, I was just saying that's exactly what Dan Mangena says, isn't it? With his micro steps, micro shifts.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. That's what micro shifting is all about. Yeah, taking one little step at a time and making it believable every step of the way. Yeah, so those baby steps make it so much easier. And what I was going to say is that's the big risk with the approach that Louise and I take, because when we go after it, we're going to manipulate, we're going to make it happen in a big way. We're just as liable to put up a whole bunch of resistance at the same time, just because we've got this huge amount of energy we're building up. So we've learned to be a lot more careful. We've learned to be a lot more cautious about, okay, what is it we're doing here? But we still try to manipulate. What can I say? That's the honest truth.
You're a true American.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam. Which, by the way, is true. I am actually descended from Uncle Sam. It's a weird thing.
Are you?
I really am. Yeah. The man who was the original Uncle Sam. This was back in the War of 1812, actually, which was the war that followed our American Revolution against the British occupiers. The War of 1812 was sort of a follow-up to that, and during that war, my great uncle, I'm not sure how many greats back, was working for the U.S. government as a meat inspector. He worked in a factory in Troy, New York, and he was inspecting meat for the Army. In other words, this was meat that was going to be distributed to the troops. And his name was Sam Wilson. It got around that he had a U.S. stamp because he was stamping all the meat packages, and it got around that the U.S. stood for Uncle Sam because that was Uncle Sam's mark that the meat was okay. And that became the first official time that Uncle Sam was identified with the United States. Wow. And he's I don't know how many greats, but he's like 7 or 8 greats behind me.
Well, do you remember the TV series The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Oh yes, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
That's where I got the idea of Uncle Sam from.
Yes.
That TV series.
Yep. Napoleon Solo. That was a campy show, really campy. But it was fun.
I'd never seen TV before, and we went to Nelspruit now and again, which is a town next to the town I lived in, and we saw it through somebody's window now and again. It was a long story. Actually, it was very difficult to see a TV.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people don't understand that. There were no computers, no TVs when I was young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's true. That's something that younger generations have a little trouble with, understanding what it was like to grow up without a computer, which we did.
Yeah.
There was no such thing. Didn't exist.
Didn't exist. Well, it existed. It's just that it occupied a room about 5 stories high.
That's right. My dad had one in his office, but then only when I was about 12, And it was literally the size of a whole. He had to have a whole office, and he had to have a whole office cooled, and it was this huge drum you put in that IBM drum,
I think it was in the late 1940s when the first computers were being invented. There was a political scientist at the time who said that the world would never need more than 12 computers.
I was fascinated at my dad's work and talking about the subject. Not very LOA, but the guy had an IBM PC, one of the first ones. My dad said, "You see this little thing here? It's bigger than that huge one in the office over there. It's more powerful than that one."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The history of computing is really quite fascinating. And I have to say, I like the fact that the world of movies have decided to start picking up some of those stories. So we're getting some of the stories of what happened during the earliest stages of the computing age. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see it playing out on screen, even if half the time it's inaccurate. I don't care about that. It's just still fascinating. Anyway, yeah, this whole topic of of influencing weather, and of course, it's not the only thing that we can learn to influence, but anything that has a large mass component to it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm glad we kind of talked about how to kind of understand and look at that. I normally try to stay away from anything having to do with politics or anything like that, but I'm going to just touch on it, just kind of on the edge for a moment here, because people often want to know, regardless of whatever their particular belief is, whether they're left wing, right wing, middle of the road, whatever, they usually have some main issue that they're hoping they can get everybody else to be on board with, so that can be pushed through and that becomes the law of the land and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that people often want to do and want to know is, well, how can I use the law of attraction to get my issue passed, to get my pet position, to take over the earth, so to speak. And that's about as close to the politics as I want to get with it, but just that close. What would be your answer to that, Louis? How do you influence the masses to adopt my viewpoint? Or is it even a good idea?
It's a very simple answer. Why would I want to restrict other people's freedom to choose? I wouldn't even dream of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would do completely the opposite. I'd make sure they have the right to choose. Mm-hmm. Goes back to the COVID scenario, which I said, I think maybe last week, where a bunch of moms got together and I was saying that I was anti-vax, and
mom
was saying I really am pro-vax, and I said, well, I'm so happy you're pro-vax and all the rest of it. Isn't it nice to have the freedom to choose to be vaccinated? I just have a problem when people choose to push their belief structures and their ideas onto other people and start enforcing it with passports and et cetera, and restrictions. I said, that's where I have a problem. I don't have any problem with you choosing what you want.
So, do you want to dare to dip a toe into this before we leave the political realm? Because we don't want to get deep into politics, but Anne-Marie, I thought you'd get a chance to weigh in on that.
I think if you've got that need and you're wanting it and you're focusing on it rather than just trusting and letting it be. So you've got that need. It's down the spiral thought process. Yes. So it's like you say, it's trying to influence others. It's something you have to have, which that's not how it works.
So Anne-Marie's pointing out something which I will term in my words. You're pointing out the idea that you fall apart and everything falls apart once you start thinking other people and other things are broken.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
That's exactly what happens.
Because you're not seeing everything as perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is, you came to this world to play with contrast, and then you start bitching you're playing with contrast. I'm playing the way you want them to play the contrast. Mm-hmm. It's just a joke. It's just funny. You're not getting it. You're falling. The whole scenario is falling apart as soon as you believe things, people, places are broken.
Somebody recently asked me.
And there's none of that appreciation, is there?
Oh no, that's true.
Appreciation of all the effort it took to get it to that broken place.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happened. Somebody recently asked me. They were one of the people who are opposed to climate change, to global warming, that sort of thing, and they were asking me, what's going on with the forest fires and all this other stuff. Just goes to show, global warming was correct. And my reply was, well, it just goes to show me a whole bunch of people were focused on global warming, and so they made global warming happen. And she said, yeah, you're right.
And you'll get another study that'll say completely the opposite. And
That's
then you'll
right.
say, look.
So, yeah, you get exactly what you want. Just be careful you know what you want.
There could be people on this planet that are so focused on the world being broken global warmingly that they will only experience and see that information feeding into them. You'll get somebody who's completely the opposite, and will get only the information that the world's healing and coming together, feeding into them. And then from the one perception it's broken, from the other perception it's starting to heal and everything's going well, and it's the same world.
Mm-hmm.
So what is going on is the psychological drama that goes on in somebody's head.
Or sometimes
That
in the
is
news
the
media.
factor.
And-
You're not
and-
able to see things as they are.
That's right. And I'll give you an example that was very recent here in the United States. About 2 months ago, there was another cycle where there were fires going on in California, and they were destroying a lot of acreage. There were homes being destroyed, and so on and so forth. And then a day came where, if you looked at the news was just full of the headlines about all this stuff going on. But then you went and looked at an actual weather forecast through, weather.com or AccuWeather or one of these weather websites, and the weather was clear. There was no actual fire activity going on in California. They'd had rain. The fire's been put out, but the headlines hadn't caught up with it yet. So you had two different realities going on. If you were paying attention to the headlines, you would have been convinced that all this stuff was still going on in California, and it wasn't.
That was the same here with our weather system. We were supposed to all be flooded and awful storms and on weather warnings, and events were being cancelled. And I know it was like that in some places. We hardly had any rain, and we were supposed to be right under that, but not a drop.
Amazing. It's amazing what the power of that. There's an example of how the power of the collective can kind of come together for good or for ill. You can look at it either way you want to, but it comes together and produces a result that another part of the collective doesn't experience. That's really what we're describing right here. One collective area had this experience, and another collective area had that experience, and they were both about the same place in the same time, but they had two different experiences entirely.
Richard Bach illusions, perception, use it or lose it.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yeah, perspective. Well, actually, in his case, perception pretty much was the same thing as perspective. He used the two words pretty much interchangeably, and that's exactly it. By the way, Anne-Marie, have you ever read that book, Illusions by Richard Bach, that we've been referring to here?
No, I've not heard of it.
Oh, you gotta read that one. Bach was the one who wrote the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, if you remember that one. But Illusions, in our opinion, is the best one, and it was written in the 1970s, early 70s, and it way predates any of the references to law of attraction that became very popular many years later. But it describes law of attraction to a T, and it's written in a fiction format. It's not like here's a how-to on how law of attraction works. It's a story. It's a story that
when you finish the story, the thing that
goes.
goes through. When you finish the story, Anne-Marie, the thing that goes through your head, very clearly is, was this true or wasn't it?
Yes.
Did it really happen to Richard or not? Because he nailed that book. He just nailed it.
He really did.
Completely.
In fact, I remember having a conversation on that very question. Did it really happen? Did Richard really exist, and did he really experience that? Of course, the author is also named Richard, so you kind of associate him with a character in the book. But I actually had a contact from a woman about 4 or 5 years after that book came out. I don't even remember how she got in touch with me. Again, this was the pre-computer era. There was no Facebook. There wasn't like social media or anything like that. Somehow we connected over the fact that we both had read this astonishing book, and we were trying to answer that exact question. Did that really happen? Could that really happen? And we were scratching our heads saying, I don't know, maybe. Could it? I don't see how.
Now that's a good book.
It is a good book.
It's a very short book,
Isn't
Anne-Marie.
it?
It's very easy to read.
Very easy, yeah. If you really want to, you could read that in an evening. I mean, you can stretch it out over a few days if you wanted to, but it's a very light read, very easy read,
but it's a classic you will take to your grave.
Oh, absolutely!
I love books like that.
Yeah, Richard Bach's Illusions is a wonderful book. So, yeah. So, what are some other examples of the madness of crowds, where crowd activity produces one result or another result or whatever, regardless of what their intention was? Their overall product was pretty obvious because of their thoughts and their behaviors.
Silence.
You can see that these three people here don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about collectives.
I live in my own world. Don't know which one you move in.
That's right. That's
not the
another
same as
illusions
mine.
concept, by the way. Yes.
I
trying to
really
think-
don't get involved with the outer world much, and the way I cut myself off is mostly by not looking at too much news. And when I do, and it gets fed to me usually through other people,
Right.
I'm usually laughing myself silly. What have they done now? Oh my God, this is weird. Yeah, no, I can't take these things too seriously. You'll leave it to those who really want to fight that corner. They'll take it seriously and they'll run with it, and they will get old quickly. But no, I didn't say that.
Too late. Can't take it back.
I'll watch the grey hairs grow quickly.
Well, I've got plenty to spare. Take one of mine. No problem.
I'm going to dye my hair again next week.
But it does remind me, Anne-Marie, of what we talked about in Taya, where it really comes down to how are you feeling about the stuff that you don't like in life, right? Where the Taya practice is all about trying to appreciate stuff that rubs you the wrong way. And now Louis has, the absolutely effective method of just laughing at all of it, which is a very effective way to deal with it. But
I do.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was
Go
just going to say, but that's what I do now is if something crops up, I'm always like, well, okay, where's the appreciation in this? Or, I might swear a few times and just like get annoyed, but then I'm like, okay, what can I appreciate about this? Okay, this is annoying me, but actually it's flattering that somebody thinks I can help them, or just trying to find some good in it. And it's not easy, but like I said, even with the flood, we were kind of doing that back then. It's like, okay, this is a really horrible situation, but it's brought the street together, and we're going to get the floors that we couldn't afford, and we're going to get brand new sofas that match the new decor, and we just try and take the best out of things and have that appreciation out of these really sort of horrible situations. And sometimes that's really difficult. I get that, but it's kind of how I try to view it. And sometimes it can take me a while to get to that whole appreciation thing, because I'm quite happy being there in my own pity party, but it doesn't last for long. And then I find
it's
something.
My party and I'll So Anne-Marie, last week, your takeaway, if I'm correct, was to focus on your own happiness.
Yes. And I took...
Which is the greatest gift you can give everybody else. So how did your week go with that kind of concept rolling around your head?
Oh, good question. It went okay, actually. I had a good week. Had some fun stuff happen. And just the way I kind of equate it is to work is just trying to have more fun with my role and not see it as like, oh God, I've got to go to work. And it's much like David's been saying, and and having that appreciation for the system we've come into. So trying to enjoy my job, and all these people are like coming to me and I'm having fun interaction with them. And they might be getting stressed with other people and they might be moaning about something, but actually after our conversation we just have some fun with it. So that's kind of what I've had, and just like having more fun with my children. And we had a situation today. It's just like we have no electronic Sundays, so no phones, no iPads or anything, and the kids have got Kindles.
I'm coming to live with you on Sunday.
I'll get the wine in the fridge, Louis. Feel free.
Wine instead of electronics. I think I can do.
I know, it's
I can play that.
And that's Anne-Marie's happiness. But anyway, the little one, she's only 5, but she hid the electronics. Well, they're 2 sort of like iPads, that she hid them, and we've not been able to find them for like 5 or 6 months. So like, so it's
been Sunday every day.
Oh, that's Mum. Can I have your phone?
Yeah,
that's right.
But we had some fun with that. I was saying to my little girl, okay, I said to my eldest one, she was on about she really wanted a pad. I was like, fine, we'll ask the universe, focus on finding it. And literally today, my little one went into the dining room, she went under the table and she'd seen that she'd put it under the sewing that's still a pile of the last 6 months that needs to be doing. There with her pads. And she kept going, look, Mum, I found them. And I was going, that's what the universe does, kid. And we were just trying to make fun of things.
That's
so
really
yeah,
good.
we've had a lot of fun and a lot of happiness.
As you were describing that, I was brought to mind an experience Louise and I had when we went to the beach on Saturday. After the day at the beach, we decided to get some ice cream. We went to an ice cream stand, and there's a mom there with the father, and there were probably 4 or 5 kids, and I'm not sure they were all her own kids. They may have been, they may not, maybe they were adopted, I'm not sure. But it was clear that she was kind of at a rope's end because they were just loaded with energy. They were running all over the place, and you could tell she was embarrassed by the whole thing. Now, the kids weren't actually causing anybody any problems at all. It was more the mom reacting to what was going on. But you could tell she was just, her teeth were on edge. It was that kind of a situation. So I was thinking, what can I do to help her kind of detune that situation? And I thought of something, and I turned to her and I said, wasn't it great to have that much energy when you were that young? And she said, oh, yes. You could just all the release coming out of her as she said that. And then she made more comment about that. I think she actually commented that some 10 minutes before they just had some cake. So that explained where a lot of the energy was coming from. And so that led to my next comment was, isn't it interesting how we decide to give them sugar when they have that much energy? She says, I know. But it diffused the situation for her. It diffused it completely so that she was just, not having a bad experience. She was now seeing it from a more positive outlook.
Walt, I would have said something very similar. I would have said, which type of children would you prefer? The obedient, quiet, do what I say type child, or the one who's full of energy and running around doing their own stuff?
I could just anticipate her answer. It would have been something like, do I get 2 choices on this one?
I definitely would fall in one camp rather than the other with that one. But yeah, I can understand some parents would be saying, yeah, I want the first.
I'll take the first one, right. For only 10 minutes, but,
I always say about my children is the things that drive me crazy are the things that I love the most. It's their tenacity, it's their strength, it's their views and their fun. But that's also what drives me completely bonkers.
Yes, it's almost like they're testing you, isn't it? Like it's instead of like with Tyler we have a check-in process, right? It isn't so much a check-in as it's a check with the child's checking with you. Okay, Mom, how are you doing on your vibration right now?
Yeah, I notice that a lot.
So
it's very valuable, Walt, to use the word vibration. For the very simple reason it's all inclusive. It includes your mental, your physical, your emotional, all dimensions. Doesn't matter what it is. The word vibration covers all of it. So you're now talking to the whole of them.
Right.
You're not talking to any broken up segment which you might be honing in on. You're now saying, what's your vibration? How does it feel vibrationally at the moment? Where you are vibrationally. And then you're also talking emotional scale, where you are on the scale, etc. And once you're there, you start being able to be clear of what your next step is. Because I like breaking it down. Oh, I'm frustrated. Ooh, let's go to I don't care. Ooh, I'm on a don't care. Ooh, let's go to hope.
Right.
Oh, I'm on a really depressed. I'm depressed. Let's go to revenge. It's so cool.
Sometimes I'm not sure I want to be around Louis, to be perfectly honest. It could be a little bit dangerous.
Oh, yes, I'm very dangerous. I told somebody I'm probably the most dangerous person you've ever met.
Ooh.
So my friend says to me, What are you talking about? Talking rubbish. I said to him, I help people change their thinking. There's nothing more dangerous than that.
True. It's very true. Yeah. Thank God for that kind of danger, I'll tell you. It's the best kind that there is.
Depends which way it's going.
Yeah.
You know, these fake gurus that are telling you to jump off a cliff, you know, it depends which way you're going.
I think that depends on more about which gurus you're paying attention to. I mean,
That's
that,
what I'm
maybe that's
saying.
just me, but I mean, some gurus, I'll say you first. I mean,
Lead the way.
That's right. Show me how it's done. Come on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting ride to interact with human beings, but it's something I've been kind of practicing lately, kind of playing with. How can I help influence somebody, particularly somebody who's struggling, and you can tell that they're struggling? How can I influence them, help them do that release? They don't even have to know how release works or what it accomplishes. Just, can I help them to do that release? And it almost invariably is accompanied with a smile when they are able to release. So that's always a rewarding thing.
So Walt, what I do if I see somebody who's struggling, I immediately go to the emotional guidance scale. Like say they're in rage or frustration or wherever they are, and I say, okay, what's the next one up? Okay, let's focus on that kind of vibration and see where we go from there. So I already use that scale to help me.
You like that a lot.
Aim just getting them a little bit further from where they are, so not taking them some big leap somewhere else, but just a little bit further. And that's what Abram does every time when they get somebody in the chair. They can see where they are, and they can see that they are ready to move to the next vibration. So they bring them out of the audience based on that principle.
Oh, yes.
Where they are and how eager they are to go into the next vibrational level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're always
Which
working
is
with
fascinating.
the ones. It is fascinating. Well, first of all, it shows how in touch they are. They can just grab that person instantly. But secondly, it shows the power of what it is that they're teaching, because when you can see it happen in somebody who's right teetering on that edge, so you know you're going to get a quick result, it kind of reinforces for you, oh yeah, I can get quick results with this kind of thing. So if we got some sort of resistance
for the last 35 years.
That's right, yeah.
Exactly the same thing, same
over
teaching,
and over again.
Slight variances, that's it.
Yes. What's it they say?
It's probably 40 years now, actually. Well,
yeah, it probably is. But what is it they always say? They say this at almost every workshop. It's like we know what all the questions are and the answer is always the same, something along that line. I can't remember how they phrase that. That's the gist of the idea.
You've got numerous different questions, but the answer is always the same, yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah, okay.
Something like that,
yeah.
And I
So
remember
40
one
years
guy
of the
sitting in the
same
seat
answer.
and said, the guy sitting in the seat and said, I know what the answer is. You've already taught me what the answer is.
Yeah, right.
I'm still struggling with this. That's so funny.
It's so true, though. Well, hey, I'm not complaining about it. It's given me a 9-year run talking about it here on LOA today. So, more power to all the different varieties, ways to understand that one basic answer.
Do you know what I love? There was an AA guy sat in the seat, and there's 12 steps to the Alcohol Anonymous training,
Right.
And the guy was giving some of the steps, and Abram said, "Oh, I wouldn't quite put it like that." Then Abram literally broke down all the 12 steps and reworded
really?
them.
No kidding.
So you've got a complete Abram Hicks 12-step.
Oh, I'd like
version
to see that one. That's cool.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Is that a YouTube video?
Really cool. Yeah, somewhere, I don't know.
It
You'll
is.
probably just be able to type AA.
Yeah, I'll look for
Abram
that.
Hicks, and it'll pop up. But it was quite a long one because they literally dug into the wording. He said, "What's the wording of number 1?" And then broke it down. "What's wording of number 2?" I'd say it this way. "What's wording of number 3?" And broke. It was really cool.
I'm going to pull that out. Louise would like that one from her therapeutic background as a therapist. She dealt with AA people all the time. So yeah, well, actually, lots of 12-step programs. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I'll have to check that out. So, all right. Let's see. What else can we bring in the last few minutes that kind of ties all this together? Because it's been an interesting exploration of what happens with the delusion of masses, the ability of the masses to pull in one direction or pull in another direction, and then to have an individual come along and just slice it down the middle and just take his own little piece. Yeah. And the rest of them just kind of keep going their own merry way. It's a fascinating subject, no matter how you look at it. Well, all right, I'm going to go to a little bit of a darker side. There are people in wartime.
There's a dark side?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Didn't you get the memo?
Must have missed that one.
Yes. Yes, there is a dark side. No, but during wartime, there are always people in war zones who come out of it unscathed. So, massive battles happening all around them, and their house is the only one that remains untouched. Now, it doesn't get a whole lot of attention. The war films don't really spend a lot of time on that, but that is a fairly common theme. It happens a lot. It kind of raises the question.
I know a specific story. Yeah.
Do you really? Okay. Well, what's the story? Tell us the story.
Well, this lady and her husband were living in this kind of like mansion on a hill, and the whole war destroyed everything around them, and then the enemy took over, and they took over their house, but they happened to land up with a leader of the group who was happy to employ them and let them stay there and continue. So they went through the whole war and the whole shift and the shift back again and stayed in their own house the whole way through. And with shells hitting and bombing around them, but they were never hit that house the whole way through.
That's crazy. Yeah. But my point was...
And they came out of it on the other side that they started and all alive.
Which is really something, yeah.
and having, being occupied by the enemy force.
But I guess the reason I brought the whole thing up is that story, that kind of story has happened a lot. And if you look for it, you can find it documented in a number of different books, a number of different sources. Why is it that we never really noticed that as a collective? I mean, until Law of Attraction came along, I don't think most people even noticed that was a pattern.
Because history is written by the victors. Well,
yeah.
Meaning history is written by the ones who did the most bombing?
No, history is written by those who want a narrative to be told in the way they want it to be told, and it's not going to include anything that's not going to have what they want.
And yet, these stories have still managed to get their way into many history books. That's what's so interesting.
Yeah. But
it's a bit...
into history books. Okay, yeah. Okay. I haven't read a history book that's included a lone house. What
were you saying, Anne-Marie?
I was going to say, it's a bit like watching the news, isn't it? Because you hear all the doom and gloom and all the bad stuff and all the things all the powerful stuff, but you don't hear all those wonderful good stories that are actually out there and happening. It's kind of what's fed to you by whom, isn't it? And you can find these stories if you want to, if that's on your radar. I mean, personally, I don't like to watch the news.
You mean you're not a member of the Good News newspaper online? There is one, actually.
I have heard that, yeah.
Don't get many subscribers. I don't know what that says about humanity, but I don't know.
Well, I think we do know exactly what that says about humanity. They're not focused on the good news. It's very simple. It's very direct. That's all right. That's why we do this at LOA today. We want to kind of counter everything a little bit. Because we need that counterbalance in life, don't you think?
With the clarity you can work with it, yeah.
We can, yeah. So just a reminder, no show Thursday or Friday. We will have shows on Tuesday and Wednesday. We have a special guest joining us tomorrow, because just as Anne-Marie decided to give a try here on Monday, we have Bridget D., another listener who's going to be joining us on Tuesday. So that's something to look forward to. And then, of course, it's Wendy and Jackie on Wednesday. Cindy and Jackie on Wednesday. And they are that's like one of the most fun days of the week. So be sure you tune in for that. But in the meantime, I will thank you guys for your insights and your stories. Stories are the best part too. Anne-Marie, I don't know if I made that clear. We actually prefer stories here on the show. So just kind of save up your collection. Write them in your journal. Then bring the journal with you.
I will do.
Stories. Yeah,
it's here.
All right, so you got it with you. That's good. Have journal will travel.
You're gonna have to read it though, Anne-Marie.
Fortunately, you get to pick what you're going to read, but nevertheless. But yeah, bring the stories, and thanks for bringing the ones that you did, and keep bringing them, because those stories, they're wonderful. We love it. That's what makes all this stuff so much fun to study and to talk about. It's the stories. The stories are what bring them along. So very good. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to anybody who was tuning in the live stream. We did have a few people on the live stream. Thank you especially to our podcast listeners everywhere, and we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.